Morning, everyone. I'd like to thank you for choosing this as your fall break destination vacation location. So kind of you. We're in a 3-week fall break series. I think last week was Radford and New Rivers fall break. This week is Virginia Tech. And next week is Montgomery County Public Schools. So surely everybody can find themselves in some category to take a quick fall break. But I'm really glad that you've chosen to be here today, because today we are in for a treat. This morning, we're going to begin a 2-week series called This Is My Church. I'm wondering how many of us can or would like to claim that. We're going to be thinking about what it is to claim yourself as part of a community of folks who are seeking to live toward God together. And especially what it is to offer ourselves where we are, which in this case is in this church. Every time someone joins our church with official membership, many of you have seen it happen here many times, we celebrate. And we celebrate because it's a really fun day, but we also celebrate because we believe that means God is going to do something different with us because you are here. Something that wouldn't be possible otherwise because you've come. Something that will change us or grow us or challenge this particular community because you've decided to be part of it. Recently, someone in our church found a poem, and the poem was called This Is My Church, which has become the basis for this series. I think that poem captures this sentiment if you listen to it carefully. So you're about to hear the poem this morning. The voice you're going to hear reading it is the voice of Preston Latimer. I don't want you to be thrown off. Preston will be reading from the balcony today. I just don't want anyone to assume this is what God sounds like. Preston is actually here in the room, and now he'd like to share the poem with you.
This is my church. It is composed of people just like me. It will be friendly if I am. It will do a great work if I work. It will make generous gifts to many causes if I am generous. It will bring others into its fellowship if I bring them. Its seats will be filled if I fill them. It will be a church of loyalty and love, of faith and service, if I, who make it what it is, am filled with these. Therefore, with God's help, I dedicate myself to the task of being all these things I want my church to be.
So when I hear this poem, I can imagine so many of you writing it and saying it. In fact, as I look out into the room this morning and I see it in your eyes, I look at many of you who've placed your lives here. And I hope it's obvious that we are different because you've come. Honestly, whenever I need to remember what matters most, you are my examples. Your stories are the tapes that I play in my head. I know that's true for many of you as you think about one another. But this morning, I'd like to introduce you to one specific person here in our corner at Edges. Some of you probably have met her before. It's really not that she's anything but completely ordinary. It's just that she's one witness for how God shapes a life through a commitment to the church. So this morning I'd like for you to meet my friend Lou Talbot. Lou Talbot has been in this church, in Blacksburg United Methodist Church, for 48 years. She's been giving her life in this church here with these people since I was 1 year old. I've known Lou for the better part of a decade, and whenever I get to meet with her, which is frequently because I make her, I always feel like I want to stop her so that I can just write down what she just said. If I was a tattoo girl, I would have Lou tattooed all over my body. In summary, I just marvel at Lou's humor, at her faithfulness, at her malleability. I admire how flexible she is, and at her strength. We've been through much together, and Lou's been through much in her life. So about a month ago, I asked Lou if we could do a video session. Because I was working on this series, and I know that Lou personifies that poem that we just read together, and I was thinking if I could get her on video, I wouldn't have to write the stuff down anymore. I could just watch the videos over and over. So Lou agreed for Luke and me to meet her in her home and to shoot a little footage. And throughout the whole adventure, she referred to us as Barbara and Walter. That's Barbara Walters and Walter Cronkite. Many of you are too young to know who they are. That would be maybe like John Oliver now. Anyway, feel free to call Luke Walter henceforth if you'd like. Anyway, in the spirit of 2020 and Barbara Walters and Walter Cronkite, I'd like to invite us to experience today as sort of a 2020 episode, which I would title The Story of a Generous Life. After most of the clips that you're going to see, we're going to pose a reflection question on the screen, and it'll just be for you to consider silently, so I'll offer some space in the room so that you can have a moment to think. Not because you'll have all the time you need, but because maybe it will help you to prompt yourself to go back and think about it some more later. I think one value in anybody else's story, anytime we hear it, is how it prompts us to understand something about our own, to learn something about ourselves and about God. So I'd like for you to meet my friend Lou on video.
I asked you to do this interview in part because I know you to be one of the most giving people I've ever met, and I often wonder how someone gets that way. Talk to me about your childhood and your family and how you came to be in this fold of love.
I grew up in a rural community, and I credit my grandfather. My grandfather died when I was a child, but I credit my grandfather for the faith that I have today, because my grandfather gave an acre of land for this little country Presbyterian church to be built on. And I could sit on my front porch and see the church from my home. But neither of my parents were members of the church, and I was the only person in my family. In other words, I came from an unchurched family. I was the only person in my family that went to church and attended church. And when I was about the year before, or the summer, spring before I went to first grade, my Uncle Millard, and that's an old-fashioned name, Millard, said to my mother, and my full name is Luella, he said, "Would you send Luella to Sunday school? Because she's soon going to be going to school and catching the bus, and she's old enough to walk to church." I suppose it's about an eighth of a mile. And so my mother said she'd send me, and so I started going to Sunday school and church. And I walked by myself, and I remember a grove of trees on the road, and I sort of would run fast by the trees because I wasn't quite sure, a little bit afraid, but not too afraid to go. And one Sunday I came home, and my aunt was visiting, and she hugged me, and she said, "What a smart little girl to go to Sunday school and church all by yourself." And I thought, well, I don't know what's so special about it. I do it every Sunday. I remember growing up in the church, and when I was about 12 years old, I joined the church and was a Presbyterian all of my life until I married into the Methodist Church about 48 years ago, and I've been a member of Blacksburg United Methodist Church ever since. And I've grown to love the church because at first it was okay, but as I have worked and attended the Methodist Church, I appreciate the very sound foundation of the church.
Who can you credit for any faith you have today? And then what, if any, church memories are associated for you? Maybe that would be a great list for you just to keep running in your head this week. See what you can learn from the people who've given you what it is that you know. Total aside, but that little bedazzled hat that Lou has on in the video, 21 of those she has. 21 different colors of the same bedazzled hat. Can you even think of 21 different colors? So this is so strange. Today is the first time I have seen Lou without one of those hats on in at least a year. She's in the room today. I don't know if you know. She's sitting right over here. She's having a better hair day. I guess God does that for you on the day you're going to become famous. You get a better hair day. Toward the end of the last clip, Lou speaks about what the United Methodist tradition means to her, what it means to be a part of this particular group of people, how it's provided for her a sound foundation. It made me think about how lots of people get tripped up by denominations. Which one's right, which one's wrong, what's the difference among them? Is it substance that makes a denomination different, or is it just style that makes a denomination different, or is it both? But the thing I always sense about Lou is not that she's found some perfect match in the United Methodist Church. I sense she could have found her home in any church. So it's not that she found United Methodism to be perfect. What I sense is that she's just fallen in love with the heart of the thing. Enough to overlook some of the bumps, which is what any of us have to do in any relationship that we choose. So I asked her to reflect about that, and she began talking about the founder of United Methodism, whose name is John Wesley. And John Wesley said that Methodists just believe what's common for every Christian, that we don't believe anything different than any other Christian denomination believes. But Wesley did want something that he saw as uncommon in the day that he lived, and that was that believing would influence living, that what we believed would influence the way we lived. And Wesley thought that the way we lived could be enhanced by developing some methods, some things that we would always do, hence the term Methodist. I would have called it habits, which would mean we would have been habitist. So I think it's good that Wesley got to the name first. But anyway, in this clip, Lou talks about where that heart comes from.
John Wesley had such a firm foundation for our church. One of the things about the Methodist Church that I like is our brand. And some people would say our logo. But the fact that we have that solid cross that stands there all the time, representing that Jesus died for our sins. Then we have the red flames that come out. And I think that's absolutely marvelous, because that logo, that brand, was taken right out of the New Testament, one of the Bible scriptures, 2 Timothy 1:6. I remind you to set into flame the gift of God that is within you. If you can imagine Methodists being on fire for Christ.
We don't so much plaster that brand all over and everything anymore as sort of current day United Methodists, but if you look anywhere around the world and you see a Methodist church, you'll be able to find that brand somewhere within it. And that's not just now, that's been for hundreds and hundreds of years. People have been trying to remember what it is to be set into flame. The way you might hear it here at Edges that you may not know is connected to that is when we sing songs like the one we just sung, Set a Fire Down in My Soul, that I can't contain and I can't control. I want more of you, God. I want more of you. Connections across a long period of time throughout millions and millions of faithful people all over the world. Well, I asked Lou to imagine the folks in our church being on fire for Christ. I asked her, what did she think that would look like? And Lou talked about how important it is to simply show up, how showing up is the first step to becoming involved, to being set on fire in ways that you can't control, but that you want more of. She said that showing up leads to involvement. But it was when Lou spoke about how we show up, that we show up intellectually, that we don't check our brains at the door, and that we show up practically. That was when some sky opened up for me about what it is to show up and become involved. Here's what she has to say.
Also, the Methodist Church is intellectual, and some people will be surprised at hearing that. We are intellectual in the sense that we don't have to check our brain when we come to the door. We're encouraged to ask questions, to think, to debate, to change our minds. And there are some denominations where everything is either black or white, good or bad, right or wrong, and no exceptions are made. Meaning that you can almost take a sheet of paper and look at it and know what to do. But in the Methodist Church, we're encouraged to think and discuss and grow. And I think that's a wonderful position for a church to take. We're also a practical religion. John Wesley says, and this is also from the scripture, faith by itself, if it has no works, is dead. So if we have faith and are Christians, you're going to see our good works. You don't do good works to get your faith, but once your faith and your heart is in the church and in right with God, then you do good works.
So what are some works or actions or opportunities that have been a result of you showing up to your faith? So Lou has been in the church for 48 years, but she's had several career paths on top of that. Most recently, Lou spent the bulk of her vocation as the executive for student services in Roanoke City Schools. She's going to talk about that in just a moment. She's going to talk about the connection between believing something and living like you believe something, how it changes sometimes how you operate in the world that is beyond the church.
I have tried to apply it in my daily life, in my career. And for example, discrimination in education. How just are we in our daily work with students, for example? So I worked with students on an individual basis. And I worked with parents on an individual basis. And I didn't have a formula or a policy that applied to everybody, even though I worked within a policy that might apply certain things that I might not totally believe, but I could adjust to satisfy my conscience that I was doing the right thing for students.
Lou just kept circling back throughout the whole interview to the church as her guide and as her anchor, even in decisions like how she operated within a public school system where she couldn't always endorse everything. How could she exist and live as a person of faith? For her, the church was and has always been the center of how she understands and knows God. It matters that much for her. And throughout the interview, Lou speaks about God's never-ending generosity to her, about how she's just felt the generosity of God throughout her life, and how that's made her unable to quell the generosity that she feels toward the church.
The first thing I gave to the church was my heart. As a child, I didn't have any money to give. I gave my heart, and I was blessed. Then I gave my time. I remember teaching the little children. I'm not sure I was a good teacher in the middle school, but I colored with them and read them stories. And I'm reminded of giving time too, because every Sunday when I come to Edges and I see how much time people have thought about Edges and planned all week long, then I see how important giving time is to the church. And after that, it's important to give money, but the money is based on our ability to give, I think. So we give according to our ability. Jesus wants us to do that. It's important to give, but I think money has spiritual value.
Talk about that some.
And I think that there's so much good that is done in the church. And I'll give a good example. I think it's a good example. I remember when Reggie Tuck was here, and he was pastor at the main church, Church Street. And the old Catholic church was for sale. And he suggested to the congregation that we buy the church. And we didn't have a plan for it, but he suggested we buy the church and operate in good faith, that we would find a good use for it. So together, the church bought the old Catholic church, which is now CLC, Christian Life Center. So at first, we didn't know what we were going to do with it. And a group of people decided that we'd start a church there. And you were working part-time at the church. And so it just seemed like a small group of people said, let's start a church at Edges, and we'll call it Edges. And so that's how Edges came about. So it was significant. Purchasing the building was significant because of where it led us. And it was purely an operation of faith, I think. But it really shows the strength of people working together with the minister and making what I think turned out to be a very good spiritual decision.
So if I understand you correctly there, you're talking about how spiritual benefit follows sometimes the commitment of resources.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
So you said you gave your heart, and then you gave your time, and then ultimately you've given your money. Which has cost you the most?
Time, of course. The other thing that's important about giving is the greatest gifts are free. Love and kindness cost us nothing, and we should just be pouring that out. And we're not. We were stingy with our hugs. We're stingy with saying nice things to people. That's all free. So you give away the free stuff, and I think you get in the habit of giving, and the habit grows. And then you give more and more as you're able.
What do you think about the idea that giving has spiritual benefits? And what are you in the habit of giving to the church? Well, some of you know that it's October, and you know, because you've been in the church a long time, that every year at this time, we count on some people either exercising or developing their habit of giving money. I'm not going to do a long sales pitch here because, frankly, I don't think I need to. I think generosity is in the DNA here. You heard Lou speak about it. I think we were born in generosity, and it's yielded a whole crop full of people who just know what it is to be generous. I believe we know that giving equals growth, unlike almost anything else. That it's when we give that we grow. So I'm just going to share the opportunity for you to be swept up in the joy that is financial participation. Every church, not just this church, every church is a nonprofit. That means it operates because and only because people give. So our ministry budget how we pay for our ministers, how we keep the lights on, and how we plan for every single ministry that you see in motion. All of it is paid for by people like Lou and people like you and people like me. We dream about how we can partner with God as a direct correlation to how much money we have, how much people can give. Practically speaking, every October we ask folks to commit resources for the coming year. And what we've found is that when people commit, those commitments create habits, and those habits develop faith. And one of the most common outcomes for people is that they wind up in joy, that they actually find joy in giving. So if you're one of the people who's willing to try cultivating this habit, or if you often do cultivate the habit, it's really simple. You can pick up a card today during communion, either at the communion table or at the prayer rail in the back of the room. The cards look like this. And what I'd like to encourage you to do is simply just take the card today. Take it home with you this week, study it, think about it, analyze what are the things that you might have to give, talk to God about it, and then bring it back next week. Don't do anything with it today. Just bring it back with you next Sunday. With whatever it is you figured is a habit you'd like to try to develop for the coming year. And then I hope you'll know that every time you see something in motion, you've been part of it. You've been one who has helped make it happen so that God could do something that wouldn't have been possible otherwise without you. And now I'd like to share with you one final clip. It's where Lou talks about why it matters in the here and now and what she has decided to give.
I don't know, I woke up, maybe 30 years ago, and I realized, I don't know when it happened, I don't know how it happened, but I just woke up and I realized I had tremendous joy in my life. The only thing I know is it's because I'm a Christian that I have the joy. But I feel a love for people and think in a kind way about people and opportunities. The church is a living body of people. And it's so important to be a part of the here and now in the church. You have to be present and have to be a part of it to see and feel the needs of the church. So recently I went to Edges, and I've been going to Edges occasionally, and I just loved it. One Sunday I noticed that the little children get to come in and take communion. I love that because that's wonderful for them to get that training. And the little boy came up and he dropped his bread on the floor and picked it up and gobbled it down and went on. And I love that. I love the fact that we have those children there. I love the commitment there. I love the fact it's a new group growing and developing. And so one of the things I want to do is to get to know some of the people in Edges and work with individuals. I'm tired of working on the computer and those kind of things and deadlines, but I like to talk to people and encourage people, especially young people, young couples. I think they're so interesting and you have so much to offer. And we learn so much from young people. I like working with people of all ages, and I think it keeps me young.
Many people don't think people your age change, learn, grow, adapt. Why are you still doing that?
Because it's so much fun, Kelly. It keeps me alive. I mean, I may not be the youngest person in the room, but I like to act like I'm the youngest person in the room sometimes, because we can't stay the same. If we stay the same, it's so much fun to grow and change and to see things differently. What if we'd never changed our view on slavery, for example? Think how terrible it would be. We have to change, and we have to adapt our values. We have to be willing to change and grow as we learn new things.
Can you imagine the fun of giving your life to the church? Well, Jesus could, and that's why he did. Gave himself to the church, knowing that if we would follow his model, we would find ourselves in that same kind of joy.